Hey everyone, welcome to another installment of Harry Potter Theory. In today's video, we're going to be discussing 25 words from the Harry Potter series that seemingly everyone, even myself on some occasions, pronounces wrong. In the fans' defense, however, the world of Harry Potter is flush with all sorts of peculiar naming conventions, whether it's referring to a potion which changes one's physical appearance, Polyjuice Potion, or a magical creature that's bred out of crossbreeding Manticores and Fire Crabs, Blast and Skrewt. This list of course extends to all manners of people, places and things. The inspiration for this video came from pronunciation related comments stemming from the comment section of this channel over the last 2 years, where I've noticed that some people are awfully quick to voice what they feel is the correct pronunciation, despite the obvious absence of any sort of attempt to research said pronunciation. I know, you read it in the book like that when you were a kid, but guess what? That doesn't make it right. Furthermore, some of the intended pronunciations are completely bizarre, and no right-minded person would pronounce them that way, which is why I'm almost certain that none of you have always pronounced all of these words correctly. I also want to add that for each word there will be 3 variants: the correct pronunciation, the most commonly used mispronunciation, and my preferred pronunciation. That's right, some words, despite being wrong, just won't ever sound okay to me in their intended manner. You're probably thinking, that's sacrilege, but once you hear the list, you may feel the same way. Let's get into it. Number 1. Okay, this one is one of the worst for a number of reasons, which is why I'm just going to get it out of the way. No one pronounces this one correctly, and that's because its true pronunciation is bizarre. Are you ready? Knuts. Yes, it's a hard K. Most commonly, I've heard it mispronounced as Knuts, which makes sense, but unfortunately, not everything makes sense in the wizarding world. I'm probably criticized for this word more than any other on the channel. Knuts are of course the lowest form of wizarding currency, behind galleons and sickles in value. Number 2. Another massively contentious word, this one refers to a witch or wizard who's able to transform their physical form at will. The 2 pronunciations vying for the throne in this particular circumstance are Animagus and Animagus. Most people lean towards the former, however, we can hear the hard G being used in the films. Furthermore, the word animal, used in conjunction with the Greek word magus, create the portmanteau which comprises the word, and magus also uses a hard G. Therefore, in this instance, I lean towards the G over the J. This is also one of the rare circumstances where neither one sounds particularly bad. 3. This woman was Voldemort's mother. The most common mispronunciation for this lady's name is Merope, where in reality it should be pronounced Merope. 4. One of Harry's Irish classmates. To those of you who may have never heard this congruence of Irish syllables spoken aloud, it's only natural that you pronounced it the way it's phonetically written, Seamus. However, that pronunciation is a veritable abomination in relation to the true pronunciation, which is Seamus. 5. This character needs no introduction, and goes by many names. The Dark Lord, he who must not be named, etc. However, you may be surprised to hear that his name is probably mispronounced more than any other word in Harry Potter, despite Knuts, of course. Voldemort, which is spit out of the mouths of book readers and movie fans alike a million times a day, is actually supposed to be pronounced Voldemort, as it's technically comprised of 3 French words, vol, d, and mort, which put together mean flight of death. However, this word is a perfect and rare example of a word that I will never pronounce properly. He will always be Voldemort to me. 6. The home of the Dursleys. This English town is located in the southeast in the county of Surrey. I've heard some people pronounce this town as Little Whinging, like the wing of a bird. However, you may be surprised to hear it's actually pronounced Little Whinging, like someone that won't stop complaining. 7. Otherwise known as Liquid Luck, this powerful little potion helps Harry in the Half-Blood Prince. The mispronunciations associated with this potion aren't too bad, and usually comes down to the incorrect Felix Felicis against the correct Felix Felicis. Number 8. This brutal witch was Voldemort's right-hand woman, and a feared Death Eater in the wizarding world. Her maiden name, Black, is easy enough to say, but as it turns out, we've been saying her married name all wrong. While most of us say Bellatrix Lestrange, it turns out that it's actually pronounced Lestrange. Even though I've studied a fair bit of French, I find this one very unusual to say, and I'll probably keep going with Lestrange. 9. These are the reanimated corpses of deceased witches and wizards present in the cave. I was sure I was saying this one correctly, but I stand corrected. Where I would previously say Inferi, it turns out the correct pronunciation is Inferi. Number 10. I'd be lying if I told you I have ever felt confident about pronouncing this former Auror and Minister for Magic's name. Even with some internet research, I'm still not sure if it's Rufus Scrimgeour or Rufus Scrimgeour. I'm leaning towards the former, but perhaps one of you in the comments can help. 11. This centaur lived in the Forbidden Forest, and even taught divination at Hogwarts. Furthermore, an E at the end of a word we don't know always throws a spanner into the mix. It turns out that the commonly pronounced Firenze is actually pronounced Firenze. 12. This spell, which serves a simple purpose, bring an object to the caster, is under all kinds of scrutiny online, but while there are several renditions floating around from Accio to Accio, it turns out that Accio is the true victor. 13. You may have heard of this character, close friend of Harry's, Ron's lover, the brightest witch of her year. It turns out that her name has been brutalized on many occasions. I'll let Pottermore handle this one. Hermione, 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 even some of Hermione's most devout fans didn't have the slightest clue how to say her name. Needless to say, when the first film hit cinemas in 2001, there were more than a few people waiting with bated breath to hear her to-the-point introduction, Hermione. At last, it all made sense. 14. This is known as the Potion of Love, and causes a powerful infatuation from the drinker. The common debate for this one is Amortentia versus the correct Amortentia, which is confirmed on Pottermore. I always went by the former. 15. This stone-like object comes from the stomach of a goat and will save you from most poisons. It turns out fans have overcomplicated this one, pronouncing it Bezoar, instead of the correct and much simpler Bezoar. 16. This spell, used by Voldemort's Death Eaters, fills the sky with a large projection of the ominous Dark Mark. I can barely imagine the countless possibilities for how this pronunciation could be butchered, but let me bring some clarity to the situation. It's Morsmordre. This is confirmed on Pottermore. 17. This is one I say with utmost confidence, despite not knowing for the life of me whether I'm correct. And, as it turns out, after doing just a very minute amount of digging, I was completely off. Where I previously said Wizengamot, it turns out the correct pronunciation is Wizengamot, which just doesn't quite sit right with me. 18. This French wizarding school visits Hogwarts for the Triwizard Tournament, competing against Hogwarts and Durmstrang. As it is a French school, it only makes sense that it has a French pronunciation, Beauxbatons, not Beauxbatons. 19. This pure-blood wizard was a friend of Dumbledore's, as well as a member of the Order of the Phoenix. I think the big question here is, do you pronounce his last name like the Doge meme? As it turns out, his name should be pronounced Elphias Doge, and not Elphias Doge. 20. This is where Harry lived with the Dursleys, and where his Hogwarts acceptance letter was sent. Much to the confusion of some, this should be pronounced as Privet, not Private. 21. The Phoenix is undoubtedly one of the most spectacular creatures in the wizarding world, and in the Harry Potter series we become particularly familiar with one. As it turns out, the name of Dumbledore's Phoenix companion should be pronounced as Fawkes, not Fawkes. 22. This questionable wizard can be identified by his less than impressive reputation as serving the shortest ever term as Minister for Magic. I've also never known how to say his first or last name. As it turns out, it's meant to be Pius Thicknesse, but that still feels wrong somehow. 23. This spell is one of the unforgivable curses, and is used to torture people. Notorious Death Eater Bellatrix Lestrange is a known proponent of the spell. This spell should be pronounced Cruciatus and not Cruciatus, although I'm sure there are some that will vehemently vie for the former. 24. This famous witch and magical historian was the great aunt of dark wizard Gellert Grindelwald. This may surprise some, but her name should be pronounced as Bathilda and not Bathilda. 25. This one is of course a joke, but do try to remember that it's LeviOsa, not LeviOsa. And that's it for this video. Which ones were news to you? Comment down below. If you enjoyed the content, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. Until next time, remember, imperfect understanding is often more dangerous than ignorance.